You know, for over 50 years, one name has basically haunted American true crime: the Zodiac Killer. This is a guy who held Northern California in a total grip of fear with these bizarre, cryptic letters and taunting phone calls. And then, poof, he just vanished. It's a puzzle that is still one of the biggest, most compelling cold cases in history. And today, we're going to try and unpack it.
And this symbol right here, this was his calling card, the Zodiac's cross circle. It became this emblem of pure terror. And the crazy part is, after a massive investigation and literally countless theories, we still have no idea who he was.
But in all of this mystery, there is one name that just keeps coming up over and over again: Arthur Leigh Allen. For decades, for a lot of people, he was the Zodiac. But here's the thing: suspicion isn't proof. So let's really dig into this.
All right, so who was this guy Arthur Leigh Allen, or ALA as you'll hear him called? How did he become the guy in the Zodiac case? I mean, with so many other names floated over the years, why does his always seem to rise to the top?
Well, a huge part of it has to do with the stories we've all been told. You know, you see it in the movies, you've probably seen it in a recent streaming documentary. They all spin this really compelling tale that points right at Allen.
And look, the case against him, on the surface, it seems really strong. It's all circumstantial evidence, but when you lay it all out like this, yeah, you can totally see why so many people are convinced he was the one.
I mean, just look at this stuff. A phone confession to a friend, letters that kind of hint he's a killer. He wore a Zodiac brand watch. I mean, come on. Then police search his place and find pipe bombs and dead animals. And maybe the creepiest thing of all, claims that he took his friend's kids with him to the murder sites. You see a list like that and you're thinking, okay, that's our guy, case closed, right?
But hold on, this is where things get really interesting. Instead of focusing just on the suspect, let's turn it around and look at the killer himself. What do his crimes tell us? What does the evidence he left behind actually say?
So to really get inside the killer's head, we're going to borrow a tool straight from the FBI's playbook: criminal profiling. And no, this isn't some crystal ball stuff. It's all about breaking down a killer's behavior to figure out who they are deep down, to find their psychological fingerprint.
Okay, so first up, you've got the modus operandi, or MO. The MO is basically the how-to of the crime. It's what the killer does to get the job done successfully. And because it's a learned behavior, it can change. You know, a killer might get better, find a new weapon, or the situation might be different. It's purely practical.
But then you have the signature. And this is the really important part. The signature has nothing to do with actually committing the crime. It's all about feeding some deep psychological need, some kind of fantasy. It's the why he does it, not just how. And here's the key: a signature never ever changes. It's a part of who the killer is.
And this breakdown really makes it clear, right? An investigator can't just rely on the MO to link crimes, because that can evolve. What they're really looking for to connect the dots is that signature. That's the thing that stays the same. It's that psychological fingerprint we were talking about.
So, what was the Zodiac's actual signature? Well, it wasn't really the murders themselves. It was everything else. The whole performance. Sending those taunting letters and ciphers to the newspapers. That desperate need to scream, "Hey, I did this, look at me." The way he talked about his victims. Never by name, just the boy, the girl. When you boil it all down, the Zodiac's signature was this all-consuming need to prove that he was smarter than everyone, especially smarter than the cops.
All right, so now we've got a pretty good idea of who the real Zodiac was, psychologically speaking. We have his fingerprint. So now, let's take that big, compelling case against Arthur Leigh Allen and see if it actually fits.
First up, let's talk about that so-called confession. The story is that Al called up a friend he hadn't spoken to in ages and just confessed. Sounds like a slam dunk, right? Well, this comment I saw online kind of sums it up perfectly. The first time he told anyone about it was to Netflix. Seems suspiciously uncredible. I mean, think about that. You're holding onto the key that could solve one of the biggest murder mysteries ever, and you wait decades to tell a documentary crew? It just feels a little off.
And that's the bottom line, really. There's just no way to verify this claim. It's a half-century-old memory that was never reported to police back when it might have mattered. It makes for incredible TV for sure, but as actual proof, it's not there.
Okay, what about the claim that Allen took kids with him to the crime scenes? Emotionally, that's just a horrifying idea. But does it actually make any sense when you think about the killer we've been profiling?
Yeah, you really have to ask yourself, Why would a killer as careful and meticulous as the Zodiac bring kids along for the ride? This was a guy who was all about control, all about not getting caught. He planned everything.
Exactly. Bringing kids, who are, let's be real, the most unpredictable witnesses on the planet, to a murder scene, it completely flies in the face of the Zodiac's known signature. It just doesn't line up with his obsessive need for control and superiority.
All right, now let's talk about the big one. The one thing that could cut through all the noise, all the stories, and all the theories: DNA. And this quote really puts it into perspective. If there was unambiguous DNA connecting anyone to these murders, this case would have likely been solved years ago. Think about it. The Zodiac licked stamps, he licked envelopes, he should have left his DNA all over the place. And yet, with all our modern technology, we have never gotten a match. Not to Arthur Leigh Allen, not to anybody.
So, after all that, where does that leave us? Well, on one hand, you've got this pile of really weird, really spooky coincidences about ALA. But on the other hand, you've got zero hard evidence and a psychological profile that just doesn't quite match up. And this really is the key takeaway. Is it possible that Arthur Leigh Allen was the Zodiac? Sure, it's possible. The coincidences are just too weird to ignore completely. But a bunch of possibilities, no matter how compelling they sound, just don't equal proof. The case isn't a slam dunk. It's a fascinating theory, but that's all it is. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. In a case like this, one that's still unsolved, where do we draw the line between a good story and a hard fact? It's so easy to get swept up in a narrative that feels right, but maybe, just maybe, what we choose to believe says more about our own need for answers than it does about the truth.